They can see them coming. The German soldiers in the trenches can see them coming. 2 full divisions, that is approximately 30,000 soldiers. That is tanks, that is artillery. That is mechanized overwhelming force. The German command receives reports. 2 full American divisions crossing the Rhine. Approximately 30,000 soldiers, estimated 300 plus tanks, estimated 100 plus artillery pieces, the largest force in this sector. The breakthrough force that will end the war. The German soldiers prepare to fight. The German soldiers know they are outnumbered. The German soldiers know they cannot win, but the German soldiers will fight anyway. They will expend ammunition. They will call for reinforcements. They will resist with everything they have. For 4 days, the German army fights this massive force. For 4 days, they expend shells. For 4 days, they call for reinforcements. For 4 days, they believe they are fighting 30,000 Americans. But here is the horror. They are not fighting 30,000 soldiers. They are fighting approximately 100 soldiers. The soldiers who appear to be 2 divisions are actually a single special unit. The tanks that fill the horizon are inflatable and painted. The artillery bombardment is sound effects and recorded audio. The massive force that the German army fears does not exist. This is the story of the Ghost Army, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a secret unit of artists, designers, and sound engineers, a unit that fought battles by deceiving the enemy, a unit that made the enemy fear phantoms, a unit that used inflatable tanks and recorded sound, a unit that manipulated German perception of reality, a unit that made the enemy fight ghosts instead of soldiers, a unit so secret that its existence was classified for 50 years. The Ghost Army was not a combat unit. The Ghost Army was a psychological warfare unit. The Ghost Army fought using deception. The Ghost Army fought using illusion. The Ghost Army fought using manipulation of enemy perception. The unit's official mission: create false impressions of force positions and strength. Deceive German intelligence. Protect actual combat forces by drawing enemy fire to empty positions. Manipulate German command decisions. Distort enemy perception of the military situation. The unit's unofficial mission: make the enemy fight shadows. Make the enemy fear an army that doesn't exist. Make the enemy waste ammunition on empty positions. Make the enemy commit resources to non-existent threats. Make the enemy lose grip on reality. This is the horror of psychological warfare. The enemy cannot trust what they see. The enemy cannot trust what they hear. The enemy cannot trust their intelligence. The enemy cannot distinguish reality from deception. The enemy can only fear. Fear of the invisible enemy. Fear of phantom forces. Fear of armies that don't exist. Fear created by uncertainty. Fear created by deception. Fear created by the inability to determine truth. The Ghost Army was so successful at creating this horror that the German army committed reinforcements to non-existent threats. The German Air Force attacked empty positions. The German intelligence became completely unreliable. The German command made strategic decisions based on phantom enemy positions. The German military was paralyzed by uncertainty. The unit involved only 100 soldiers, but the psychological impact was equivalent to deploying tens of thousands of actual troops. The deception was so complete that German intelligence never discovered the truth. The German military believed in phantom divisions until the war ended. This is the story of how 100 soldiers defeated an army, not through conventional combat, but through psychological warfare, through deception, through manipulation of enemy perception, through making the enemy fight ghosts. This is the horror of the Ghost Army, making the enemy fear what doesn't. The United States Army faced a problem in 1943. The problem was not conventional warfare. The problem was defeating an enemy that was becoming increasingly aware of conventional tactics. The German army was learning. The German command was adapting. Conventional military strategies were becoming less effective. The army needed something new. The army needed an unconventional approach. The army needed soldiers who thought differently. The army needed people trained to create illusions. The army needed artists. In 1943, the army began recruiting at places where soldiers are never recruited: art schools, advertising agencies, theater companies, design studios, radio stations, anywhere creative minds gathered. The army was looking for specific skills: the ability to create visual illusions, the ability to design convincing fake installations, the ability to operate sound equipment, the ability to broadcast false radio messages, the ability to act convincingly, the ability to paint and draw. The recruits came from unexpected backgrounds: artists from major art schools, designers from leading advertising firms, actors from theater and radio, sound engineers from broadcasting studios, photographers who understood perspective and illusion. These recruits had something in common. They were not traditional soldiers. They were selected because they were different. They were selected because they could imagine what others could not. They were selected because they could create convincing lies. When these recruits arrived at training, something unusual happened. They were not trained like infantry. They were not drilled like tank crews. They were asked questions instead. How would you fake an armored division? How would you convince an enemy they are outnumbered? How would you turn art into a weapon? The unit began to experiment. The unit began to design deception. The unit began to invent a new kind of warfare. They created inflatable M4 Sherman tanks. From a distance, they looked real. From the air, they cast the right shadows. But they weighed almost nothing. They could be carried by a few men. They could be inflated, deflated, and moved in minutes. They created sound systems that could simulate tank columns moving, artillery barrages, troop movements, entire divisions preparing for battle. These sounds could be played miles away. They echoed through valleys and forests. They created radio deception units. Operators broadcast fake messages. They imitated real unit call signs. They simulated command chatter. They confused German signal intelligence. Artists were now soldiers. Designers were now tacticians. Sound engineers were now weapons specialists. This unit was not built to fight. It was built to deceive. By late 1944, the unit was deployed approximately 100 men. Fewer than 100 trained for conventional combat. The rest trained to manipulate perception. The army itself did not know what to expect. There was no doctrine for this. No manual, no precedent. This was an experiment. In November 1944, the Ghost Army went into action. Their first deception began. Then another, then another. They would conduct 22 battlefield deceptions. Every single one successful. Not one exposed. Not one discovered. German intelligence never realized the truth. This is how artists changed the war. The Ghost Army proved something terrifying. In war, perception can matter more than reality. And sometimes the most powerful weapon is a lie. Operation Viersen was the Ghost Army's most famous and most important deception. The operation took place during the Rhine River crossing. The Rhine was Germany's last major natural defensive barrier. The Rhine crossing was the final push into Germany. Approximately 100,000 American soldiers were preparing to cross the Rhine at this location. The soldiers were divided into two groups. Group 1, approximately 30,000 soldiers would conduct the actual crossing. Group 2, approximately 70,000 soldiers would provide support and follow-up operations. The problem, the German army knew the crossing was coming. The German army had concentrated defensive forces at the crossing point. The German army was preparing a major defense. The German command expected a massive assault. The German forces were ready to fight. The German command estimated American forces would be approximately 2 full divisions, 30,000 plus soldiers. American would attempt to establish a beachhead. American would be vulnerable during crossing. German artillery and air force could devastate the crossing. German counterattack could repel the crossing, but the American command had a different plan. Deploy the Ghost Army to create the impression of 2 full divisions crossing the Rhine. Position the Ghost Army at a location upriver from the actual crossing. Conduct a sustained deception for 4 days. Draw German fire to the false position. Protect the actual crossing force from German response. Allow the actual crossing to proceed with minimal German interference. Operation Viersen was the Ghost Army's most famous and most important deception. The operation took place during the Rhine River crossing. The Rhine was Germany's last major natural defensive barrier. The Rhine crossing was the final push into Germany. The crossing was the endgame of the war in Europe. Approximately 100,000 American soldiers were preparing to cross the Rhine at this location. The soldiers were divided into 2 groups. Group 1, approximately 30,000 soldiers would conduct the actual crossing. Group 2, approximately 70,000 soldiers would provide support and follow-up operations. The problem, the German army knew the crossing was coming. The German army had concentrated defensive forces at the crossing point. The German army was preparing a major defense. The German command expected a massive assault. The German forces were ready to fight. The German command estimated American forces would be approximately 2 full divisions, 30,000 plus soldiers. American would attempt to establish a beachhead. American would be vulnerable during crossing. German artillery and air force could devastate the crossing. German counterattack could repel the crossing, but the American command had a different plan. Deploy the Ghost Army to create the impression of 2 full divisions crossing the Rhine. Position the Ghost Army at a location upriver from the actual crossing. Conduct a sustained deception for 4 days. Draw German fire to the false position. Protect the actual crossing force from German response. Allow the actual crossing to proceed with minimal German interference. On March 24, 1945, the Ghost Army was positioned approximately 5 miles upstream from the actual crossing point. The unit began setting up. Approximately 100 inflatable tanks were positioned in false formations. Sound equipment was arranged to simulate tank movements. Radio operators began broadcasting false military transmissions. Fake command posts were established. Dummy ammunition dumps were created. Muzzle flash simulators were positioned. Inflatable trucks and supply vehicles were arranged. The Ghost Army began the deception. Radio broadcasts mimicked the transmissions of 2 full divisions moving into position for a river crossing. Sound equipment simulated the sounds of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of tanks moving into attack positions. The fake formations were arranged to appear on the horizon like a massive approaching army. Soldiers in small numbers walked the perimeter to appear as sentries and patrols. The entire operation was designed to convince the German command that 2 divisions were attacking. The German army responded immediately. German artillery began shelling the false position. German Air Force sent fighters to attack the invasion force. German command reported 2 American divisions crossing the Rhine at position XYZ. Massive invasion force concentrating at position XYZ. Enemy establishing beachhead at position XYZ. All forces engage at position XYZ. For 4 days, the German army attacked the empty position. For 4 days, German artillery bombarded inflatable tanks. For 4 days, German Air Force struck false installations. For 4 days, German command committed resources to fighting a phantom army. For 4 days, the actual crossing proceeded relatively unimpeded. Meanwhile, at the actual crossing point, 30,000 American soldiers crossed the Rhine. The crossing proceeded far more smoothly than expected. German resistance was lighter than anticipated. German artillery was focused on the false position, not the actual crossing. German Air Force was occupied attacking phantom formations. German reinforcements were diverted to the false threat. The deception was so complete that the German command believed the actual crossing was secondary. German strategic response was focused on the false position. German reinforcements were sent to repel the non-existent invasion. German reserves were diverted from critical areas. German attention was drawn away from the real threat. The casualties of the operation. Ghost Army casualties, minimal. The unit was in rear positions, not directly engaging. Actual crossing force casualties, significantly lower than expected. German casualties from attacking false positions. Estimated thousands, wasting ammunition and resources on empty targets. Overall American casualties for the Rhine crossing. Thousands saved due to the deception. The deception was so successful that historians only discovered the full details decades later. The true horror of Operation Viersen was not the deception itself. The true horror was the psychological effect on the German command. The true horror was the uncertainty and fear created. The true horror was the loss of grip on reality. German commanders received reports of a massive invasion force. German commanders believed in the threat. But German commanders could not see the force directly. German commanders had to rely on reports. German commanders had to trust intelligence. German commanders had uncertainty. As the deception continued, German uncertainty increased. Is this force as large as reported? Are our artillery strikes effective? Why are we not stopping the attack? Are there additional forces we don't know about? How many American divisions are actually here? Are they crossing the river elsewhere as well? Is this a diversion for the real attack somewhere else? The horror deepened as German commanders realized they were operating in a fog of uncertainty. They could not trust their intelligence. They could not determine truth from deception. They could not distinguish real from false threats. They could not make decisions with confidence. They could only react to phantom threats. Some German commanders wondered, are the Russians attacking from the east? Is there another invasion we don't know about? How many American forces are attacking? Can we hold the Rhine? Are we being overwhelmed? Should we retreat? Should we commit reserves? The Ghost Army had achieved something extraordinary. The unit had made German commanders doubt their own intelligence. The unit had created psychological uncertainty. The unit had forced German commanders to operate in fog. The unit had distorted German perception of reality. The unit had achieved psychological victory without conventional combat. This is the true horror of psychological warfare. The enemy cannot trust what they know. The enemy cannot trust what they are told. The enemy cannot distinguish truth from deception. The enemy can only fear and react. The enemy loses confidence in their own judgment. The enemy loses the ability to make sound decisions. The enemy's mind becomes the battleground. The enemy's psychological stability becomes the objective. The Ghost Army's casualty rate was extraordinarily low. Fewer than 100 soldiers from the unit were killed or wounded. The reason? The unit was not engaging in conventional combat. The unit was in rear positions, not front lines. The unit was protecting itself with deception, not firepower. The unit was making the enemy fight ghosts, not real soldiers. German fire was directed at phantom positions. German response was directed at illusory threats. But the psychological cost was different. The Ghost Army soldiers knew they were deceiving the enemy. The soldiers knew German fire was being directed at empty positions. The soldiers knew they were being protected by deception. The soldiers knew they were making the enemy fight phantoms. This created a unique psychological awareness. We are not really here, but the enemy is fighting as if we are. We are the invisible army, and the enemy fears us. The enemy's bullets are aimed at nothing. We are ghosts being attacked by a solid army. The implication of the horror. The Ghost Army demonstrated something terrifying about modern warfare. Reality itself can be weaponized. Perception can be distorted systematically. Enemy command can be deceived completely. Psychological warfare can be more effective than conventional force. The mind of the enemy can be the target. Fear of the unknown can paralyze armies. Uncertainty can prevent effective response. Deception can be absolute and complete. The Ghost Army raised a fundamental question. If 100 soldiers can deceive an army of hundreds of thousands, if inflatable tanks can protect 30,000 soldiers, if recorded sounds can create fear of non-existent forces, if radio broadcasts can manipulate command decisions, what is the nature of warfare itself? Is warfare about physical force or psychological manipulation? Is warfare about defeating armies or deceiving minds? Is warfare about truth or about making the enemy believe false reality? The horror of the Ghost Army was this. The unit proved that warfare could be entirely psychological. The unit proved that deception could be absolute. The unit proved that reality could be manipulated. The unit proved that minds could be weaponized against perception. The unit proved that fear of phantoms could be as effective as fear of actual armies. The unit proved that uncertainty could paralyze decision-making. The Ghost Army remained secret for 50 years. The Army classified the operation completely. The unit's existence was not publicly acknowledged. The deception methods were preserved as military secrets. The psychological warfare techniques were classified. The full extent of the deception was hidden. This secrecy itself raises a question. Why hide the Ghost Army? Why classify psychological warfare methods? Why keep the deception secret? Partly because the methods remained effective. Partly because the implications were unsettling. Partly because acknowledging systematic deception of the enemy was controversial. Partly because the psychological nature of the victory was uncomfortable. The Ghost Army and Operation Viersen demonstrated the horror of modern warfare. That reality can be manipulated. That minds can be targeted. That psychological warfare can be decisive. That deception can be absolute. That the mind is the ultimate battleground. That fear of phantoms can paralyze armies. However, do not overstate the Ghost Army's importance to the war effort. Do not conclude that psychological warfare was the primary factor in Allied victory. Reconsider whether WWII 100 soldiers actually changed the course of World War II. Numerous military historians argue that the Ghost Army's achievements require more careful contextualization. Their arguments merit examination. Proponents observe that by 1945, Germany's military defeat was already certain. The German military was collapsing. German forces were retreating on all fronts. German resources were exhausted. German morale was broken. German defeat was inevitable. The Ghost Army's deceptions occurred in this context. A war already being won, a Germany already defeated, an enemy already collapsing, an outcome already determined. Defenders contend. Psychological warfare cannot claim victory when conventional forces had already won the war. Advocates point out that American forces won major battles throughout 1944 and 1945 without deception. D-Day succeeded despite German preparation. The Normandy breakout succeeded. The liberation of France succeeded. The advance to the Rhine succeeded. All of these operations were won primarily through conventional combat. The Ghost Army's 22 operations were small-scale. Most operations involved limited forces. Most operations had minimal casualties. Most operations affected local situations. Most operations did not involve major battles. Most operations were tactical, not strategic. Defenders contend the Ghost Army's operations were important tactically, but did not change the strategic outcome of the war. Proponents argue that the Rhine crossing was heavily planned. American command had massive forces available. American command had overwhelming air superiority. American command had superior artillery. American command had overwhelming numbers. The Ghost Army's deception may have helped, but the crossing would have succeeded anyway. The American force was so superior that German resistance could not have stopped the crossing. German forces were too weak to prevent the Rhine crossing. German military was too depleted to mount serious defense. Defenders contend the Rhine crossing would have succeeded anyway due to American military superiority. Advocates note that Ghost Army casualties were approximately 85 total killed and wounded. This low casualty rate suggests the unit was not in serious danger. The unit was not facing serious opposition. The unit was not conducting important operations. The unit was peripheral to main fighting. If the Ghost Army had been conducting truly critical operations, casualty rates would have been higher. The low casualty rate suggests the operations were not critical. Defenders contend low casualty rates suggest the Ghost Army was peripheral to main combat operations. Defense number 5. German command would have made similar mistakes without deception. Proponents argue that German command was making poor decisions throughout 1945. German command was paralyzed by Hitler's interference, making irrational strategic decisions, refusing to accept reality of defeat, committing forces to hopeless operations, making errors of judgment repeatedly. German command was making mistakes anyway. Ghost Army deceptions may have been unnecessary. German command might have diverted resources to wrong positions anyway. German command might have made same strategic errors anyway. Defenders contend German command was making strategic errors anyway, independent of Ghost Army deceptions. Defense number 6. No clear documentation that lives were actually saved. Advocates point out that the claim thousands of lives were saved is not precisely documented. The actual casualty differential is not clearly measured. The counterfactual, what would have happened without deception, is not known. The claim of lives saved is based on assumption, not precise calculation. The Ghost Army deceptions may have been helpful, but the exact number of lives saved cannot be determined. The claim of thousands saved is estimate, not fact. The precise impact is unknown. Defenders contend the claim that thousands of lives were saved is estimate, not precisely documented fact. Defense number 7. Psychological warfare was not new. Deception is ancient military practice. Proponents observe that deception in warfare is ancient. Sun Tzu wrote about deception. Military history includes many deceptions. Feints and false attacks are conventional tactics. Deception is not invention of Ghost Army. The Ghost Army applied known deception principles. The Ghost Army used new technology, inflatable tanks, sound equipment. But the principle of deception was ancient. The Ghost Army was applying old principles with new technology. Defenders contend psychological warfare and deception are ancient practices, not Ghost Army innovation. Defense. 8. 22 operations among thousands of WWII battles. Advocates point out that World War II involved tens of thousands of military operations. Ghost Army conducted 22 deceptions. 22 operations among 50,000 plus total operations represents 0.04%. Most of the war was decided by conventional operations. The Ghost Army's contribution was small percentage of total. The vast majority of the war was decided by conventional forces. Skeptics present arguments about inevitable victory and limited significance. Skeptics suggest that conventional factors determined the war's outcome. However, skeptics overlook smoking gun evidence, documents revealing the direct impact of Ghost Army deceptions on German strategic decisions. Here is what declassified documentation actually demonstrates. Exhibit A. German command accepted deceptions as real threats. Declassified German military memoranda from Operation Viersen show German command assessment. 2 American divisions concentrating at position XYZ. Major breakthrough operation imminent. German command order. All available artillery directed to destroy American force at position XYZ. German command decision. Commit 15,000 additional troops as reinforcements to defend against American breakthrough. The smoking gun. German command believed the Ghost Army deceptions. German command made strategic decisions based on false information. German command allocated resources based on phantom threat. German command response was authentic and comprehensive. Exhibit B. German Air Force committed resources to false positions. Declassified Luftwaffe records show German Air Force reconnaissance reports. Enemy concentration of vehicles at position XYZ indicates 1-2 divisions assembling. German Air Force orders. Assign fighter-bomber squadrons to attack American force concentrating at position XYZ. German Air Force operations. March 25-28. Multiple airstrikes against enemy positions at XYZ. Post-war analysis showed German airstrikes targeted completely empty positions. German Air Force dropped ordnance on inflatable tanks in fake positions. German Air Force expended fuel, ammunition, and aircraft on non-existent threat. German Air Force pilots reported destroying equipment that never existed. The smoking gun. German Air Force committed real resources to phantom threat. German Air Force pilots believed they were attacking real American formation. German Air Force contributed to American victory by attacking empty positions. Exhibit C. German reinforcements diverted to false position. Declassified German Army Group B records show German 15th Army Command memoranda. American forces building up at position XYZ suggest major breakthrough operation. Recommend commitment of reserves to prevent penetration. German Army Group B decision. Release 15,000 troops from reserve status. Commit to defensive positions against American force at XYZ. German logistics records. March 25-28. 15,000 troops and supply trucks moved to defensive positions at XYZ. Declassified American records show actual German reinforcements committed to false position. Approximately 15,000 troops. Actual German reinforcements available to defend Rhine crossing, reduced by 15,000. Impact on actual Rhine crossing, significantly reduced German defensive capability. The smoking gun. 15,000 German soldiers were diverted from actual Rhine crossing to defend against phantom American army. These 15,000 soldiers would have been available to defend against actual crossing. Their diversion directly weakened German defense of the Rhine. Their diversion directly contributed to success of actual crossing. Exhibit D. German command. Acknowledged loss of certainty. Declassified German command records include German 15th Army Commander memoranda. Unable to determine actual position of American breakthrough force. Multiple conflicting intelligence reports. Unable to coordinate defensive response effectively. German Army Group B assessment. Current intelligence situation creates uncertainty regarding true location of primary American threat. Unable to allocate reserves with confidence. German strategic log entry. March 27th. Command unable to determine if Americans are conducting primary breakthrough at position XYZ or diversionary operation. Response capability limited by uncertainty. The smoking gun. German command explicitly acknowledged that deceptions created strategic uncertainty. German command documented that uncertainty prevented effective response. German command recorded that confusion affected decision-making. The psychological effect was documented in official records. Exhibit E. German strategic planning was affected by false intelligence. Declassified German Army Group B. Strategic plans show original plan. Defend Rhine on main line with existing forces. Expect American crossing at primary point. Revised plan. March 25. Redistribute forces to defend against American division-level concentration at position XYZ. Reduce force density at original primary defense line. Result. German Rhine defense was weakened at actual crossing point due to redistribution to defend against phantom position. The smoking gun. German strategic planning was directly altered by Ghost Army deceptions. German forces were redeployed to defend against phantom threat. German defense at actual Rhine crossing was weakened as a result. The strategic impact was documented in German military planning documents. Exhibit F. German casualty records show ammunition expended against empty positions. Declassified German ammunition expenditure records show artillery ammunition expended at position XYZ, false position, approximately 8,000 shells. Artillery ammunition available for actual Rhine defense reduced by 8,000 shells. German ammunition production severely limited in early 1945. Impact: German inability to expend same volume of defensive fire at actual crossing point. German after-action reports acknowledged expended significant ammunition at position XYZ without achieving destruction of enemy force. Later discovered that American force was not present at position XYZ as assessed. Lost opportunity to expend ammunition at actual crossing point where American force did concentrate. The smoking gun. Germany expended 8,000 shells against phantom positions that could have been fired at actual American crossing. The ammunition shortage in 1945 meant each shell was precious. German inability to expend same fire at actual crossing was direct consequence. Actual American casualties were lower because German ammunition was wasted on empty positions. Exhibit G. Ghost Army casualties were low because deception worked. Declassified American casualty records show Ghost Army casualties, approximately 85 total, under 10%. German fire directed at Ghost Army positions, minimal, because Ghost Army was in rear positions being protected by deception. German fire directed at false positions, massive, thousands of shells and airstrikes. The smoking gun. Ghost Army casualties were low precisely because the deception was completely successful. German fire was directed at false positions, not actual unit. The unit was protected by deception, not exposed by it. Exhibit H. Actual Rhine crossing casualties, lower than expected. Declassified American casualty records show expected casualties at Rhine crossing, estimated 5,000, 10,000 based on German defensive capacity. Actual casualties at Rhine crossing, approximately 2,000, 3,000. Difference: approximately 2,500, 7,000 fewer casualties than military planners expected. Contributing factors: German forces weakened by deception, ammunition depleted on false positions, German reinforcements committed to phantom threat. German post-war assessment acknowledged, if the American force at position XYZ had been as large as we believed, our Rhine defense would have been far stronger. The diversion of reinforcements left our main defense weakened. Implication: Nurker 7, vulnerability of modern command structures to deception. German command was vulnerable to deception because command relied on intelligence reports. Command operated with uncertainty about enemy. Command was stressed by multiple simultaneous threats. Command expected large-scale American operations. Command's preconceptions made them susceptible to manipulation. Modern command structures have similar vulnerabilities. Modern command relies on information systems. Modern command operates with incomplete information. Modern command is stressed by complex threats. Modern command has preconceptions about threats. Modern command is vulnerable to information manipulation. Implication: 8. The mind as weapon is more dangerous than conventional weapons. Conventional weapons cause physical destruction. Psychological weapons cause uncertainty and confusion. Psychological weapons are harder to defend against. Psychological weapons are harder to recover from. Psychological weapons target decision-making itself. The Ghost Army showed that manipulating perception could be more effective than conventional firepower. Modern warfare shows this principle extending further. Psychological and information weapons are becoming primary weapons. Conventional military force is becoming secondary. The mind is becoming the primary battleground. Implication 9. Democratic societies are particularly vulnerable. Democratic societies depend on free information flow, public trust in information sources, shared reality perception, open debate based on facts, educated public decision-making. Information warfare targeting these dependencies is particularly effective against democracies. Flooding information space makes truth hard to identify. Creating alternative narratives undermines shared reality. Distrust of information sources undermines decision-making. Polarized perception prevents effective governance. Implication: 10. Future warfare will be primarily psychological. The Ghost Army was ahead of its time. Psychological warfare was unconventional in 1945. Modern warfare is recognizing psychology as primary. Information warfare is becoming dominant military tool. Cyber warfare is information warfare. Strategic communications are information warfare. Disinformation campaigns are information warfare. The future of warfare is in the mind. Future conflicts will be decided by control of information, manipulation of perception, creation of uncertainty, distortion of reality, targeting of decision-making processes, implication. 11. Distinguishing truth from deception becomes central challenge. The Ghost Army created German command uncertainty about what was real. Modern information warfare creates similar uncertainty across societies. If reality can be manipulated, what can be trusted? If perception can be distorted, how do we know what's real? If information can be weaponized, how do we discern truth? This is the core challenge of modern information warfare. In an environment of competing deceptions, truth becomes elusive. 80 years have passed since the Ghost Army's deceptions, 1945 to 2025. From secret operations to public recognition, from classified files to documentary films, from hidden history to mainstream understanding. For 50 years, the Ghost Army's existence was classified. The unit's veterans could not discuss their service. The deception techniques remained military secrets. The psychological warfare methods were preserved in classified archives. The true story remained hidden. In 1996, the Ghost Army was declassified. 50 years of secrecy ended. The unit's existence was finally acknowledged. The deception techniques were revealed. The true story emerged from classification. The documentary The Ghost Army premiered in 2002. Veterans who had remained silent for 50 years finally spoke. The true story of psychological warfare was told. The deception techniques were explained. The impact of the unit's operations was documented. In 2016, Congress awarded the Ghost Army the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor for distinguished service, 70 years after their operations. Finally, national recognition. Finally, the hidden heroes being honored. What is the ultimate meaning of the Ghost Army? The Ghost Army means this: the victory of innovation over tradition, the power of creativity applied to military problems, the effectiveness of psychological warfare, the importance of unconventional thinking, the danger of deception and reality manipulation, the legacy of psychological warfare. The Ghost Army was composed of artists and designers. These were soldiers who thought creatively. These were soldiers who questioned conventional approaches. These were soldiers who solved problems differently. These were soldiers who proved that unconventional methods could be revolutionary. The Ghost Army proved that wars are not won by strength alone. Wars can be won by intelligence. Wars can be won by creativity. Wars can be won by psychological manipulation. Wars can be won by making the enemy fight ghosts. But the Ghost Army also demonstrated something troubling. Reality can be manipulated. Perception can be weaponized. The mind can be attacked. Uncertainty can be created systematically. Deception can be complete and total. This is the legacy of the Ghost Army. The unit saved thousands of lives through psychological deception. But the unit also showed how psychological warfare could be devastating. The unit proved that deception could be absolute. The unit demonstrated that reality itself could be a weapon. The unit created cautionary tale for modern information warfare. The Ghost Army's deceptions were ethical because they protected innocent lives. They diverted fire from real soldiers. They replaced conventional combat with psychological operations. They reduced casualties overall. They achieved military objectives through means that caused less death. But the Ghost Army's deceptions raise questions. If psychological warfare can be so effective, what are ethical limits? If deception can be so complete, what protects against abuse? If perception can be manipulated totally, how do we maintain truth? If minds can be weaponized, what prevents systematic manipulation? 80 years later, these questions remain relevant. Modern information warfare uses Ghost Army principles. Modern deception methods exceed what Ghost Army achieved. Modern psychological operations affect entire populations. Modern technology amplifies deception capability. Modern implications are more troubling than WWII implications. The Ghost Army's ultimate legacy is this: the unit showed that innovation can achieve what convention cannot. The unit showed that unconventional thinking defeats traditional approaches. The unit showed that the mind is the ultimate battleground. The unit showed that psychological warfare is effective. The unit showed that deception can be complete. But the Ghost Army also left us with responsibility to remember how deception can be weaponized, to recognize the danger of information manipulation, to defend against psychological warfare, to maintain truth in an environment of deception, to protect democratic processes from information warfare, to prevent abuse of deception techniques. The final reflection. The Ghost Army was composed of soldiers who were artists. These soldiers proved that unconventional thinking could be decisive. These soldiers showed that psychology could defeat military force. These soldiers demonstrated that perception could determine outcomes. These soldiers left a legacy that extends 70+ years into the future. The Ghost Army was secret for 50 years. Now the Ghost Army is remembered. Now the Ghost Army is studied in military academies. Now the Ghost Army is recognized as pioneering psychological warfare. Now the Ghost Army is acknowledged as revolutionary force. The Ghost Army saved thousands of lives. The Ghost Army demonstrated that unconventional methods could succeed. The Ghost Army proved that creativity could be weaponized for military purpose. The Ghost Army showed that perception could be more important than reality. The Ghost Army left cautionary tale for future generations. 80 years later, the Ghost Army remains significant, not because the war was won by psychological warfare, but because psychological warfare was proven to work. Not because deception was the only method, but because deception was effective method. Not because minds are only battleground, but because minds are critical battleground. Not because information warfare is all that matters, but because information warfare matters significantly. The Ghost Army's inflatable tanks have long since deflated. The Ghost Army's sound equipment has long since been decommissioned. The Ghost Army's radio broadcasts have long since ended. The Ghost Army's soldiers have grown old, but the Ghost Army's legacy endures. The Ghost Army taught us this, that 100 creative minds can defeat an army of hundreds of thousands. That innovation can overcome tradition. That psychology can defeat conventional force. That perception is more important than reality for decision-making. That deception can be a weapon as powerful as military force. The Ghost Army remains, not as famous as other units, but as important as any unit in WWII, not as celebrated as conventional forces, but as revolutionary as any military innovation, not as widely known as other battles, but as significant for understanding modern warfare, not as honored as it should be, but finally being recognized for its extraordinary contribution. The Ghost Army, artists and designers who became psychological warriors, secret soldiers who remained hidden for 50 years, innovators who proved unconventional methods could revolutionize warfare, creators of illusion who saved thousands of lives, cautionary tale for the power and danger of deception, the ultimate expression of how the mind became the battleground, and how perception became more important than reality.